Hey everybody, this is Tony with GameZone.com, and today we're going to take a look at Aliens Colonial Marines, the sci-fi shooter from Gearbox. Heading into Aliens Colonial Marines, I was sure of two things. One, the Alien film franchise is one of the best sci-fi classics, and two, it's never had a proper video game tie-in. Plenty have tried to replicate the experience in the form of a video game, but they've failed countless times. For some reason, developers and publishers can't seem to get it right. Having now played Aliens Colonial Marines, I still remain sure of those two things, though I'll admit that Gearbox has had one of the better attempts. Upon firing the game up, I immediately felt the guys at Gearbox really care about the Alien franchise. From the overall presentation to the lighting and music, Aliens Colonial Marines offers the authentic Alien experience. These guys are fans, and they have no intention of ruining the franchise. Taking place after the events of the second film, a new squad of Colonial Marines are sent as part of a search and rescue mission to investigate the USS Sulaco and locate the missing Marines who were dispatched to LV-426.
Sir, what happened in there? We shit the bed.
From a story standpoint, Aliens Colonial Marines offers a similar experience to that of the film. It's dark, it's gritty, and it's got a real sci-fi kick to it. Unfortunately, some of the characters fall flat. It's hard to fault the game for the many campy lines, as Aliens had its fair share. Unfortunately, it's not just the dialogue. The presentation of your fellow Marines is lackluster. It's hard to have any sort of attachment to them because of how emotionless they appear in-game. Even during some of the more intense moments in the story, the characters are dead in the face and don't appear to have any sort of response to what's going on around them.
Actual, this is 2-1. What do you make of this? Sir, is there someone else on this ship?
The in-game cinematics are hardly a step up, suffering from frame rate issues and just an overall lack of visual detail. To its credit, much of the game's faults aren't necessarily with the concept, but rather the execution. There were parts at the beginning of the game where I genuinely felt as though I were playing a sequel. As I navigated the cold, narrow corridors, motion trackers pulsing in hand, the thought of being alone as I hunted a single xenomorph through a cocooned room had me on the edge of my seat. But somewhere in the early middle stages of the game, shortly after crashing on LV-426, the violence ramps up and it seems Gearbox lost their way. Opting for an even bigger sequel, the game leans on heavy encounters with enemies, both xenomorphs and Weyland-Yutani humans. It stops playing like an Aliens film and instead resembles any other generic first-person shooter.
Can't take much more of this!
And it's here where the game's faults begin to rear their ugly heads. It starts with the gameplay. The weapon types are spot on, but combat's clunky and generic. Xenomorphs accurately scale walls and ceilings, doing a somewhat decent job of popping out of the shadows. Unfortunately, once in the open, they're awkward in their movement and animations. Watching them run at you like a baby T-Rex becomes more comical than terrifying. Not to mention, there's little reason to fear them. Just a few shots from a Weyland-Yutani Corps soldier is more likely to incapacitate you than a few swipes from a xenomorph. It not only emasculates the xenomorphs, but results in some very frustrating deaths. Don't get me wrong, gameplay aside, there's still plenty Aliens Colonial Marines does right. Exploring LV-426, as limited as it may be, is still a neat experience. For fans of the franchise, revisiting these iconic locations will bring back classic memories of the movie. As I mentioned, Gearbox has done a tremendous job of researching the franchise, and it shows in the backstory you uncover through hidden laptops. Hearing Newt talk with her parents or running into some of the weapons used by the original Colonial Marines will surely elicit an emotional response from fans of the series. There's also quite a few twists and surprises thrown in that will likely catch you off guard, though I will admit, there wasn't nearly enough power loader combat sequences. Following the campaign, Aliens Colonial Marines does offer a multiplayer component. While not pivotal to the core experience, it does offer some nice replay value. An interesting feature to note is that your character profile is linked between the single player and multiplayer modes, meaning any levels you gain in the campaign and weapon upgrades as a result will carry over to the multiplayer portion. While the multiplayer is a nice feature, it's also not anything you can't already find in other first-person shooters. Aliens Colonial Marines may not live up to the hype, but it's far from a bust. Fans of the film franchise will absolutely find joy in the game. After my first playthrough, I immediately wanted to watch the films again. With that being said, average gamers with no emotional ties to the Aliens franchise might want to look elsewhere. I have no doubt that the good folks over at Gearbox are fans of the Aliens franchise.
We shit the bed.
It just doesn't necessarily reflect in the gameplay itself. Having said that, this certainly isn't the worst Aliens game I've played.
Well, we're not dead, so, There's that.